So, chapter 2 of the book of Jonah, verse 1, like I said in Hebrew, starts with the last verse of the last chapter. So, is the one that said, "And Yahweh prepared a great fish to swallow Yonah." It's interesting that the word swallow is to swallow, basically to swallow here appears as live loa, live loa. But the li is two. The second part is pretty much the word Baal, rearrange. Baal, as we know in in English, is Lord. In Spanish is Señor. Those two titles in English and Spanish are commonly used to refer to God, which is interesting because God and Baal are the same. So Lord God is pretty much Baal, fortune. Baal who gives fortune. Um, so here we see the name Baal as the false Elohim, the Lord, who will be involved or to whom people will give the praise when they kill the witness, like Moshe, as Yonah was being eaten here or swallowed by a great fish. Also, dag, which is great fish. I mean, fish. Gadol is great. Dag in Hebrew is written with a dalet and a gimel. This right here is dag in Hebrew. This is a door. This is a door. This is a leg or a foot moving. So this represents movement. This represents riches. Um, Also fortune, and that is the first letter of God. So it represents fortune. It represents those who are rich. Uh, it represents movement, action. This is a door. Yahushua said, "I am the door." So this is a fish. And Yahushua said to the disciples that he came to make them and make us fisher of men. Fishers of men. And a dag is basically the door moving, as in the door moving for people to enter through Yahushua, who is the door and gives us riches through the action that he performed on the tree or the cross. Now, this is amazing also because this is the word dag, but if I do this, we have the word God. God. This is fortune. This is whom they call Lord, whom they worship instead of Yahweh. So we see that the fact that a dag gadol, swallowed Jonah, we could also say a great God, the God that they worship in the world as great and as Lord, was the one who killed Mashiach. So interesting, at least to me, that the word dag, fish, who ate Jonah, is the same word as God. So the door moving in order through Yahushua for people to enter, or the door moving to be closed through the last. Once they kill him, the door of mercy will be closed and people will be left to the lack of mercy of God. So the word God is in dag. The word gadol has to do with great, as in the Elohim of this world, whom they see as great, and the word swallow also can be seen as Baal. So God, Baal, is found here in this verse. So it says, and to swallow Jonah, and it happened that Jonah was in the belly of the fish, Hadag, the belly of God, could be said too, 3 days and 3 nights. Then, what would be verse 1 in most scriptures says, Then Jonah prayed to Yahweh his Elohim from the fish's belly. From the fish's belly. So God, as the backwards of Dag, the Elohim of this world, when he executes the law that says that if a person sins must die, so Satan, as the accuser, uses the law to make sure that people die for their sins and go to a prison, being that prison Sheol, as the belly of the fish, the prison of God. Hope that's clear. I'm not losing anybody with the explanation. So then Jonah prayed to Yahweh his Elohim from the fish's belly. And he said, I cried out to Yahweh because of my affliction. We need to understand this prayer is actually being, even though it says from the belly, because he was in body, his body was physically in the belly of the fish, but his soul in Sheol, as we are about to see. But I just want to explain this right away. This whole prayer represents the witness like Moshe praying in Sheol after he fulfilled the will of Yahweh. Obviously also connects with Mashiach, the first who went through affliction for us. I cried to Yahweh, I cried out to Yahweh because of my affliction, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. This is huge, because even though the word is saying from the fish's belly, the prayer is saying from the belly of Sheol. So there we understand that Sheol is the fish. The fish and Sheol are representations of one another. His body was in the fish, his soul in Sheol. And he called Sheol a belly, because Sheol is the belly of this earth that swallows those who die. That's why Yahushua used that representation so clearly regarding his death and resurrection, going to the belly's fish, meaning the belly of of Sheol. So, out of the belly of Sheol I cried, meaning he was dead. And you heard my voice. And you heard my voice. This is important because the second coming, is the voice of Yahweh. The voice. Yahushua HaMashiach is the word. That's why we saw in the first chapter, first verse, that the word of Yahweh came to Jonah. Now Jonah is saying, you heard my voice. Yahushua the first is the word. The second coming, as Jonah in this book, is the voice. And then it says, For you cast me into the deep. For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas. And the floods surrounded me, as Noah, being in the ark, was surrounded by the flood. And Yahushua said the days of the Son of Man would be like the days of Noah. The floods surrounded me, and your billows and your waves passed over me. Basically, you allowed them to kill me. You allowed the nations to get rid of me. That being the witness like Moshe speaking. It says when it says that the waves passed over me, it's interesting that it says alai avaru, which is the verb that comes from or that is the root of Hebrew, Ibri, Hebrew. So he said, I am a Hebrew. And now he's saying, your waves passed over me. We are used to pass from one place to another, as we passed from Egypt to the desert, from the desert to the promised land, from this world to the next, from this life to eternal life. But in order for that to happen, the waves, the hate of the nations, that chaos of this world has to go over Mashiach for Yahweh to bring order to those who are looking for it yet don't know it. I mean, don't know where to go, how to get it, etc. So, and your billows and your waves passed over me. Then I said, I have been cast out of your sight. This is important because is as we see with Mashiach, when Mashiach was on the cross, he said, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, my mighty one, why have you forsaken me? So, even though he knew scriptures, well, also, just in case, he said that to fulfill what was prophesied by David in Psalms. So, Yahushua could have just said that in order to fulfill it. But the fact that he said it could also be very well, of course, have to do with what he was feeling in that moment was so great that he called to Yahweh in that matter. Like I have said already also, Yahushua said that because at that moment the spirit of life of Yahweh as the dove, Jonah, that came into him when he was immersed in the Jordan, that spirit came out of him when he was on the tree on the cross being killed. Since that spirit came out of him, that's why he said, mighty one, my mighty one, why have you forsaken me? As in, why you left me here? Why the spirit left and I'm still here? Why am I suffering? We need to understand that for Yahushua to die, for Yahushua to be able to die, that spirit of eternal life that is him and was within him at that moment had to come out of that body, had to be separated from that body because that body had to experience death. So Mashiach, when he felt that separation from that spirit that is Yahweh, he called on him and said, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. So the same way, and even deeper, I guess, will be with the second coming, because Yahushua never sinned. So he had no reason to doubt. He had no reason to be like, maybe that's not going to fulfill. Maybe I'm not going to be resurrected. Maybe I'm not this. Yahushua came from a virgin. He knew everything. When he was 12, he was talking to the Pharisees, telling them who his father is, at least to his mother. He received a spirit at 30 and did all the miracles that he did for his ministry. The second coming, comes as a thief in the night, as a slave, as a prodigal son. All of those characteristics will bring him to this words, basically, when the two witnesses are in prison and then killed. During those 10 days, the last will be praying to Yahweh for him not to forget him, for him not to get rid of him. Because of all the pressure of the nations, because of all the waves that will be passing over him, over all the arrows that will be thrown at him, he will feel the pressure. So, then I said, I have been cast out of your sight, yet I will look again toward your set apart temple. This is huge for many reasons. One, the fact that it says, I've been cast out of your sight means I've been killed. Because Yahweh has his face towards the living, towards this world. While Sheol, the world of the dead, is a place of waiting for the judgment. So, obviously, those who are in Mashiach are in presence of Yahweh once they died. But in this case, we are reading in the time of the Old Testament and what it represents when it comes to the second coming. So, I have been cast out of your sight, meaning I have been killed, I have died. Yet I will look again toward your set apart temple, meaning even though I have been killed, I will be resurrected. So he was praying and had the faith. He knew that he was going to be brought back to life. One of the reasons, perhaps, he was saying, well, I have to still go to preach to Nineveh. Yahweh is not going to let it like that. So then I said, I have been cast out of your sight, killed. Yet I will look again toward your set apart temple. So he would be resurrected. He was already prophesying that would happen. This is a prophecy of Mashiach, who happens to be the temple. He said, destroy the temple and I will raise it in 3 days. So the fact that Jonah is saying, I will look again toward your temple, instead of saying, I will build up your temple, means that is the second coming, the last, who will, once he dies and resurrects, will be able to look upon Yahweh through Mashiach. And I said it like that. Remember, first and last will become one at the end of times, as Ezekiel 37 said it, as we see in many parts of scriptures. Zechariah also. Again, toward your house, your set apart temple. Your set apart temple, your palace. And then I continue, verse 5. The waters surrounded me, even to my soul. Meaning he died once again. The waters, the nations. That's why also Mashiach was immersed in water. That represents the fact that he would die for us. The waters surrounded me, even to my soul. The deep closed around me. The deep closed around me. Tehom. The deep. The abyss. Sheol. Then it says, weeds were wrapped around my head. Weeds were wrapped around my head. This is interesting. In Hebrew, it says, Suf, which is connected once again to Yosef, Osif. There is a connection between those two words. But Suf has to do the sea of, well, the Red Sea was actually called the Sea of Reeds, but they took one E and became the Red Sea. But the sea that parted for Israel to go through was in Hebrew, Yam Suf, the Sea of Reeds, the Yam Suf. Here we see that the head of Jonah was covered, or as it says here, wrapped around with Suf, connecting this death to the passing of Israel through the Yam Suf, and showing how the redemption of the people of Israel, as the redemption of the Exodus after sacrificing a lamb, that resurrection, redemption would happen through the death of Mashiach, who would be wrapped around with a crown of thorns. So just like Mashiach got his head wrapped around with thorns, we see that prophesying what would happen with Mashiach and connecting it to the Exodus, Jonah prayed and said, weeds were wrapped around my head. Reeds could be said also. Reeds were wrapped around my head. And I repeat, connecting it to the crown of thorns that was wrapped around Yahushua's head. Suf, reed, rush, water plant, rushes. That's how they translate it. So seaweed, reed, a rush. So that shows how Mashiach would be wrapped on his head with something that would come from, with a plant, basically. And connects it to the passing of the Yam Suf, like I already said. So that was verse 5. Weeds were wrapped around my head. I went down to the moorings of the mountains. I went down to the foundations, to the bases of the mountains. Verse 6. All right. I went down to the foundations of the mountains. The earth with its bars closed behind me forever. Once again, confirming that he died. He was in Sheol, who happens to be like a prison. Once a person dies, earth closes its bars behind that person. The earth with its bars closed behind me forever. This is interesting because Mashiach, even though he died and resurrected, as Yona already prophesied by saying, I will look upon your temple again, Mashiach, after he died and resurrected, he went up to Yahweh and remained at the right hand of the Father until now. So the earth, this reality, which is about to pass, closed its doors to Mashiach, even though he resurrected. That's why he died to this world, and through him we also died to the world. So I went down to the foundations of the mountains, the earth with its bars closed behind me forever. Yet you have brought up my life from the pit. Oh Yahweh Elohei. Beautiful. And just a second, I'm trying to see it in Hebrew, but since there is a problem with the verses, I gotta look twice. Here, verse 1 is actually number 2. So, this 7 would be the 6. Alright. So, yeah, you have brought up my life from the pit, O Yahweh, my Elohim. It says, Vata'al, you have brought up Mishachat Chaya, Mishachat Chaya Yahweh Elohei. I wanted to see this because it's being translated as you have brought up my life from the pit. Shachat would be the pit. Mishachat is from the pit. And it's interesting because we have the letter Mem, the letter Shin, then the Het and the Tav. Mishachat, from the pit. And this is how it would be written. Mishachat. Now, if we take out this, I'm sorry, see backwards. This, that would be Mashach, which would be he anointed. He anointed. If we place a Yud, here we have the word anointed one, meaning Mashiach. So we have here Mashiach. The letter Yud, actually, the 4 letters of the name Yonah are 4 letters that throughout scriptures sometimes are found in certain words, sometimes are not found in those same words, meaning are letters that for reasons of gematria, for reasons of Yahweh revealing us something deeper, stuff like that, sometimes certain words miss a letter, like a Yud, a Vav, a Nun, or a Hey. Those are the 4 letters that sometimes appear, sometimes don't appear, sometimes appear extra to give more relevance to what is being said, stuff like that. So the Yud is one of those. By knowing that, let's say I take it, and that would be Mashiach. Once again, Mashiach. And I just said that this word is what we found here. Mishachat, from the pit, meaning resurrection. And, oh no, I'm doing Mishachat, I'm sorry. I should have brought the whiteboard to write it down, but let me see. No, I'm trying to write it down. Mishachat. Alright. Here we go again. Mishachat, from right to left. I'm trying to. I don't know why one letter won't show. Here we go. Mishachat. We could say also Mashiach on a tav. Mashiach on a tav. The tav, which is the last letter in the pictograph, is a cross. So Mishachat from the pit could be also seen as Mashiach on a cross, as I just showed you. Mishachat from the pit, Mashiach on a tav, Mashiach on a cross. We could see that word as a picture, a prophecy being pictured by that word of Mashiach having to die on a cross and then being brought back to life by Yahweh. That's why it says, Mishachat Chaya Yahweh Elohim. From the pit gave me life, Yahweh Elohim. Through Yahushua on a cross, Yahweh Elohim gave me life. Through Mashiach on the cross, Yahweh Elohim gave me life. We can see that by those words that I just mentioned. Hope that was clear. So it says, you have brought up my life from the pit, O Yahweh my Elohim. When my soul was fainted within me, I remember Yahweh. When my soul was fainted, as the prodigal son, when he was about to die, to be done, he remembered his father and he went to him. The same way with the last. When he was about to give up, Yahweh revealed himself to him so that he remembered Yahweh, the real Elohim, his father, and he could go on and do his ministry, the one that Yahweh sent him for. So, when my soul was fainted within me, I remembered Yahweh, and my prayer went up to you into your set apart temple. Like I already said, Yahushua HaMashiach is the temple. He said, destroy the temple and I will raise it up in 3 days after his resurrection. So Yahushua is the temple. The second coming, is the Ark of the Covenant. The temple and the Ark were one. The first and last will become one, as when the Ark enters the temple, the most set apart place. So the last represents the Ark of the Covenant. It represents the throne. Yahushua, the temple. That's why Yahushua is the Kohen Gadol. The last is the king, Melech Gadol. So when it says here, when my soul fainted within me, I remembered Yahweh, and my prayer went up to you into your set apart temple. Showing how the last, as all of us, needs to pray to Yahweh through his son, who is his temple. That's why our prayer goes to Yahweh into his temple. Yahushua is his temple. He is the intercessor between Yahweh and men. So when we pray to Yahweh in the name of Yahushua, Yahweh hears us because Yahushua is his temple. So when we pray to Yahweh, our prayer goes into his temple once Mashiach manifested. So this is also prophetical. When my soul fainted within me, I remembered Yahweh, and my prayer went up to you into your set apart temple. Those who regard worthless idols. This is key, is huge. He was thrown in the water by those who regarded worthless idols. Yet, once they saw the real Elohim, Yahweh, then they realized and worshipped him and feared him. This is important also because he was being sent to Nineveh, those who worship idols, as the last comes to the world when everybody's worshiping idols, all kinds of idols, from money to movie stars to actual pieces of gold or clay with the shape of Jesus or God. So those who regard worthless idols forsake their own mercy, their own loving kindness. Those who regard worthless idols forsake their own mercy, meaning those who follow idols are forsaking that mercy that Yahweh wants to show them. Those who follow idols will end up going through judgment, hard judgment, not through mercy. They won't receive mercy because they have been following demons. They have been following other claiming to be Elohim. So those who regard worthless idols forsake their own mercy. But I will sacrifice to you. I will sacrifice to you. As David said that he would sacrifice himself, connecting it to first and last, the manifestation of the first and last who would give his own life, Mashiach, and the prophet. But I will sacrifice to you. Verse is the last. Um. Oh no, one before last. Ve'ani bekol, and I with the voice of Todah. Ba'ani bekol Todah, meaning that he would give thanks. He's saying, but I with the voice of um, thanks, being grateful, I will sacrifice to you with the voice of thanksgiving. Yeah, well, they said it backwards, but anyways, but I will sacrifice to you with the voice of thanksgiving. In Hebrew it says, but I with a voice of thanksgiving will sacrifice to you that which I vowed. Connecting with Mashiach and the last is basically saying, I will be sacrificed to you. I will sacrifice my life to you as I said I would, in order for you to be known and revealed to the nations. Once again, it shows that the last is the call, the voice, the call. Todah is thanksgiving. And if we were to change the dalet for a resh, we have Torah, the instruction, the first 5 books of scriptures, Torah. He who wrote the Torah is Moshe, connected to the second coming, the witness like Moshe, who brings the Torah and gives Todah. The dalet and the resh are pretty close in shape, so they can be interchangeable to get other revelations from the words that we find. So resh and dalet can be interchangeable because of their shape, not because of their sound, their shape. So interesting how the world will give thanks, Todah, through the last who brings the Torah and will be sacrificed to Yahweh as he vowed. Fine from here. Oh yeah, let's go to Hebrews 13:15. This is a key verse from scriptures. Hebrews 13:15 says, therefore by him, Yahushua HaMashiach, the temple, therefore by him, or through him, as in through the temple of Yahweh, let us continually offer the sacrifice of praise to Yahweh. Let us continually offer the sacrifice of praise to Yahweh. That is the fruit of our lips that confess his name. The fruit of our lips confessing his name. So when we confess the name of Yahweh in the name of Yahushua, his son, his temple, then we are offering sacrifice to Yahweh when we invoke his name. That's why it's so important. That's why the last will preach about that. That's why that is part of the what the 144,000 have in their heads. The seal of Yahweh on their heads to be saved is the name of the Father and the Son, as we see in Revelation 14:1. So that's why here we see that Yahweh is not looking for sacrifices of animals or all the things that people think. Here it says, therefore, through him, let us continually offer sacrifice of praise to Yahweh. That is the fruit of our lips, confessing his name. So now that we see Jonah, he says, but I will sacrifice to you with the voice of thanksgiving. With voice of thanksgiving. I will pay what I have vowed. Salvation is of Yahweh. I will pay Eshaleima what my vows I will pay. And then it says salvation. Yeshuata la Yahweh. Salvation is of Yahweh, belongs to Yahweh. Yeshuata. With that word Yeshuata happens the same thing that I just did with Mishachat. I think I would have a lot of issues trying to fix the letters with my hands like I just did because the other word was 4 letter. This one is 6 letters. Yeshuata, if we were to rearrange the letters, we would have Yahushua on a tav. Yahushua on a cross. Just like we just saw 3 verses before, the word that could be seen as Mashiach on a cross. Mashiach on a cross later on shows that is Yahushua on a cross. So Mashiach would be named Yahushua, the salvation of Yahweh. That's why Jonah says here, salvation belongs to Yahweh. That is another way of saying Yahushua on the cross. Because Yahushua means Yahweh salvation. Salvation belongs to Yahweh. And there is an extra tav on it. That tav is a cross in the pictograph. So we know that Yahushua would die on a cross to become salvation for us. I hope that's clear because it's very important. Yeshuata. It finishes on with the letter Hey. We get the Hey and put it as the second letter. We get the Vav. We put it as the third letter. And we have Yahushua Ta. That Ta is the Tav. And that Tav is a cross. So Yahushua on a cross. For Yahweh. To save us. Just like 3 verses before, we could see the word in Hebrew that we can interpret also as Mashiach on a cross. Hope that is clear because it's very important. I think it's very powerful. And that is just 2 words. I'm sure we could find a lot more. So verse 10. 9. But I will sacrifice to you with the voice of thanksgiving. I will pay what I have vowed. Salvation is of Yahweh. So Yahweh spoke to the fish. That is amazing. Yahweh spoke to the fish. Obviously, he can do anything he wants. His creations can hear him and all of that. But this is as if Yahweh was talking to an angel. That angel who claims to be Elohim. That angel who fools everybody. And that angel has to listen to Yahweh who created him. So even though that fish was being worshipped by those in Nineveh, Yahweh, the Almighty, talks to that fish and that fish has to listen. Just like God has to do whatever Yahweh tells him. And that's it. God and all those third part of the angels that fell with him. So Yahweh spoke to the fish. Vayomer Yahweh ladag. And he said Yahweh to the fish. Or lagad. So Yahweh spoke to the fish. And the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. And it vomited Jonah onto dry land. Interesting that it vomited Jonah because we see that Yahweh, I'm going to go to Revelation 3. In Revelation 3 we see something interesting, and is that when Yahweh talks to the church or the congregation of Laodicea, it says, I know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot. I could wish you were cold or hot. So then, because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will vomit you out of my mouth. So Yahweh will vomit out of his mouth those who claim to believe in him, yet they worship God, prosperity, money, fortune, as we see in the church of Laodicea. That's what they did. So Yahweh is saying, because you are neither cold nor hot, you are neither out nor in, basically what it means, because you are right in the middle. You claim to be set apart, yet you are in the world doing things of the world, looking for idols and all of that. Then I will vomit you out of my mouth. As we are seeing with Jonah, Jonah is being vomited out of the mouth of the fish of God, Dag. So just like Yahweh, the Almighty Creator, will vomit out of his mouth those who follow fortune, who follow idols, who follow the fish. The same way this world that belongs to the false deity, to that angel that fell, since this world belongs to him, those people who are of the world are under him, under his authority, then him, that false Elohim, will vomit out of his mouth, out of this world, out of Sheol, also when he's resurrected by the power of Yahweh, the two witnesses. I repeat, just like Yahweh vomits those who are lukewarm, those who worship idols and fortune, that same God, fortune, will vomit the two witnesses because they speak the truth. He cannot stand them, just like Yahweh cannot stand the false congregations, the false believers, those who are rebellious, disobedient, etc. So just like Yahweh vomits Laodiceans, that God will vomit the two witnesses, will hate them, and make sure they are killed. So Yahweh spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. Yahweh gave the order, and the creature that represents an angel had to listen. So that is the end of that chapter. All right. So if people pass away and go to Sheol, later can they go to be with Yahushua? Yeah. Those who are those who believe in the death and resurrection of Mashiach by the power of Yahweh, when they died, they go to the good part of Sheol, which is paradise. And yeah, they will be able to see Mashiach. Um, so I guess we're gonna leave it here for tonight, and next week we can read the other two chapters on this channel. You can subscribe if you haven't done it yet, and you can watch all the studies. The channel is The Way of Yahweh. But if you're seeing on YouTube, you will be able to subscribe right away. I mean, you should see a button to subscribe on the corner, this corner. If you put your mouse close to this corner, you're going to see something that comes up that says if you want to subscribe, if I'm not mistaken, and you can. All right, brethren. So I'll see you next week if Yahweh allows me to be here once again.